Welcome to the historic Ocean House, a luxurious hotel that pays homage to New England's golden age of hospitality. With timeless elegance and renewed civility, this treasured resort is the setting for our special broadcast of the Ocean House Author Series. Each program features nationally best-selling and award-winning authors in a salon-style conversation, hosted by Ocean House owner, actress, and best-selling author Deborah Goodrich Royce. WCRI is pleased to partner with the Ocean House to present this ongoing series, which brings you the best and the brightest of the literary world. Now, let's take you to the Ocean House.
Mary Alice Monroe is the New York Times bestselling author of 30 books for adults and children. She has earned numerous accolades and awards, including induction into the South Carolina Academy of Authors Hall of Fame, and her novel A Lowcountry Christmas won the prestigious Southern Prize for Fiction. Mary Alice is the co-founder of the popular weekly web show and podcast Friends in Fiction. She has championed the fragility of the Earth's wild habitat. The coastal southern landscape in particular is a strong and important focus of her many novels. For her writing, she immerses herself in academic research, works with wildlife experts, and does hands-on volunteering with animals, then crafts captivating stories that identify important parallels between nature and human nature. Mary Alice is also an active conservationist and serves on several boards, including Leatherback Trust, for which she received the Leatherback Trust Lifetime Achievement Award in 2022. She splits her time between her home on the South Carolina coast and her home in the North Carolina mountains. And when she's not writing a novel, she's with her family or working with wildlife somewhere in the world. Welcome, Mary Alice. Or cats. This evening, Mary Alice will be in conversation with Deborah Goodrich Royce. Deborah's latest book, Reef Road, was a national bestseller, named one of the best books of 2023 by Kirkus Reviews, and was an Indie Next pick by the American Booksellers Association. Her forthcoming book, Best Boy, comes out February 24th, 2026, pre-order through Martin House Books. With fellow authors Luann Rice and Amy Scheib, she created the Deer Mountain Writers Retreat in the Catskills. Deborah writes the quarterly Hey Roadie reading recommendation column. She began as an actress on All My Children and in multiple films before transitioning to the role of story editor at Miramax Films, developing Emma and early versions of Chicago and A Wrinkle in Time. Deborah holds a bachelor's degree and 2 honorary doctorates from both Lake Erie College and the University of Rhode Island. With her husband Chuck, Deborah restored the Avon Theater, Ocean House Hotel, Deer Mountain Inn, United Theater, Martin House Books, and numerous Main Street revitalization projects in both Rhode Island and the Catskills. And she serves on multiple governing and advisory boards. Woo! Mary Alice and Deborah will now be in conversation, and after the conversation, we open up to questions, so please raise your hand, we'll run you a mic. And without any further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mary Alice Monroe and Deborah Goodrich Royce.
Thank you, Lindsay.
And can I raise a toast to our hostess?
Oh.
She is. Thank you so much, Deborah, for all your cheers.
I don't want to get carried away with drinking. I'll have a little sip.
And in the back is Kathy Bennett, who is both of our PR managers. So Kathy Bennett,
Kathy.
Magic Time.
Affectionately dubbed the author killer.
But this is our fun tour, this trip.
She takes you really on the road. Last year I ended up in Alabama. Alabama, you'd think it's hot, right? I had, loafers and little pants that came here, no socks, nothing. 11 degrees.
Oh, no.
Nothing open. It shut down. Huntsville, Alabama shut down. And it was like 2 months before my mom died, so I'm on the phone with my mother, and she's like, what are you going to do? I just put on everything. I look like a homeless person. I just had everything on top of everything else. I was fine.
She almost was an author killer then.
11, yeah.
But we love her very dearly.
We do, and you. And all right, I'm going to start by saying this is one of my favorite books in a very, very long time. This book is so beautiful. If you haven't started it, there are books that come along. All books take you into a world of their own. And sometimes books come along where you're really attached to the characters. And this is one of them. And I think you are going to feel the same way. So I'm really excited to talk about this. And I also want to say one more thing about WCRI. Hello out there to Radio Land. It's so exciting to be on WCRI. And Susan, you live up in Jamestown, and you'll be doing one thing or another, and you'll just hear this series. It's yeah. So anybody who's not here, you can tell them they can listen. So now,
hello everyone.
On to you. We're so happy to have you. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about the, kind of a log line or two about where the rivers merge.
I want to tell everyone right away it's a duology, and that was a new word for me too. I've done, in 30 books, I've done a series, I've done standalone sequels, but a duology is one story. And they're becoming more popular today, I think, so that perhaps in the year 2000 we bought books this thick, but now publishers and readers alike don't like the thick books. So it's one story. So when I wrote this book, it's not like I have book one, book two with different plots and all that. This is one epic novel. And it took me a very long time to not only plan it, but to write it. So that's why I wrote the middle grade books in between.
Right.
It was different enough that I could work on those while I was working on this epic novel.
Sort of a palate cleanser, like sorbet or sherbet, as we said back in Michigan.
I am so going to use that going forward. So that was my sherbet. And that's actually pretty funny. And in the time of writing it, I knew that I was going to create this coming of age for this young girl in book one, where the rivers merge. And I take you through a whole story. And at the end, I'm warning you, and those who've read it already know, I did something different. There's questions asked, sort of like a cliffhanger. Who killed JR? You're going to find out. So people are getting antsy, like, when is book two coming? I promise you it's coming very soon as I can. But book two then carries the story all the way till she's 88 years of age. So it's from 1900 to 1988. So it's a really epic, long story of a period that is really the period of greatest change in the South. Everyone thinks, wow, when you reach the end of Gone with the Wind, there's nothing more to say. Well, step aside. It's a wonderful book, one of my favorites. But this story, that 21st century, the 1900 to 1988, 20th century, is full of change, remarkable change for people and landscape.
So you've triggered so many directions I want to go in here. Let's talk a little bit. So I have to show you my sweater.
Oh, I love
There
this.
are horses featured in this book, marsh tacky horses. So I put this on, but now I'm going to take it off because I'm about to.
But I appreciate, Capitano appreciates.
Yes, and that was my homage, and here it goes. So, all right, in this book, in book one, what you do, you really have not exactly dual timelines, because you have a chunk of time of the young Eliza, really, like I'm going to say 1908 to 1925 or so. Then you go to 1988, where she's an older woman. So I think people are always interested in how an author structures a book. How did you decide that in this first book, and I think what I heard you say is you're going to go back and fill in the years in between, next book. I'm not sure.
It goes to 1988.
You said that.
It just continues right where I left off.
So we've got the early years here, and then we keep ricocheting to the later years.
Yes.
How did you decide almost that barbell that you did?
That is the favorite part of writing this novel for me as a woman and as an author. I knew, well, first of all, how do I tell this epic story of 100 years practically? And there's so much change, and I decided I would tell through the voice of one woman. So it's one point of view. And Eliza Pinckney, and if you're from the South, you know who that is. And we can talk about that later. Eliza Pinckney Rivers, which is another big name. Chalmers Delancey. So there's a couple of marriages coming up. And I decided I would have to tell this in two stories, because the first is a coming of age, the young Eliza, and the second, as she matures to 98. But what I love best about the dual timeline is this is the only way that I could show to young people today and talk to them about the changes. I'm going to have the young people ask the questions and put her on the spot a little bit as they have dialogue. You know, Savannah, for example, can nail her, or Nora asked a very pertinent question that gave her pause. I love that dialogue, but also the character arc of Eliza. She's at 88 years of old, and I couldn't have written this book 10 years ago, even 20 years ago. I had to be old enough, of a certain age, where I can look at life now and connect the dots of all my decisions. And you see that all the decisions that you made are not as random as you might have thought they were when you were young. They actually form a kind of pattern. And Eliza, at the beginning of the book, she opens up. She's hardened, tough. 88, then they're trying to shoo the little old lady away, and she's having none of it. And she takes her granddaughter and her grandniece back to her home, Mayfield, and she begins telling the stories, and we can talk about that later. But through Eliza, with that dual timeline, I was able to speak to you readers, as well as to my daughters, because I'm telling stories, but also to these two characters. And as she tells the story, I want the reader to see her relive, and you go through her reflections. She's getting tired. She wonders how she can tell this. Is it too harsh to tell them? But she's going to relive the story in her mind and in her heart so that the ice melts. And she remembers not just that she wants to save Mayfield, this plantation, and put it in conservation. She as well as we realize why she's putting land in conservation, why it matters to her. And you have to go back to that little girl in the tree hollow to understand that.
So let's talk about that. That's a great segue. You've always been interested, passionate about, and you've worked for really the ecological health of our planet, and particularly in the region where you live. And this, they just ACE River Basin, ACE, is an acronym for what rivers?
It's an acronym for the Ashepoo, the Combahee, and the Edisto rivers, three
See,
mighty southern rivers. And they
Say
all,
them again.
the Ashepoo, the Combahee, but we call it the Combahee, and the Edisto rivers. And they come together, they merge to form one of the greatest estuarine parks in the Southeast. And it's also, because of the land and the soggy water and the ocean, it's where the great rice plantations were in history. And now that's, you have a good story to tell.
So you are a Chicagoan by birth.
Yes.
And I'm a Detroiter by birth. And you've made much of your fiction has really revolved around the Carolinas and that world there.
Most of it.
So talk about your passion for that area, how you got there, what sparked for you there?
Well, I truly felt I came home and I had been in Washington, D.C. for over 12 years, and we visited South Carolina a lot. And we knew my husband had to get offered the chairmanship to be able to come. But once we did, we came. And I had heard about sea turtles, and there's a whole story I can tell there. But bottom line, I knew I wanted to set a book with a sea turtle in it. And I didn't know I would love them so much. So that was my baptism. And I wrote The Beach House, knowing that it was a mission of mine, Deborah. I didn't just say, I'm going to write a book about sea turtles. I knew that I could write a book set against these endangered species and put it in the story, not as a nonfiction, but let the story get people involved, let the emotion rise. And they, meaning my readers, would feel my passion and start to care about the animal, and that would make a difference. And I chose to do that because my mission was, if you care, you take care. I wanted people to get involved. And I believe in fiction for that, more than nonfiction. You care. And that was The Beach House, and it was my first New York Times hit. And the reason, and it was, believe me, no one was more surprised than my publisher.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was no internet back then. I'm that old. And it was all word of mouth, good old school. And I had never written a book like that. They hadn't read a book like that, but it greenlit my ability to write about species. If it had failed, I'd probably gone back to an archetypal theme.
You said a very important thing. So Alice McDermott, wonderful writer, wrote
Yes.
a book about writing called What About the Baby? And that is like, was it Chekhov or Tolstoy who talked about the gun? It was Chekhov, right? If you introduce a gun in Act 1,
Yes,
by the end of the play,
Hitchcock too.
it's got to go off because people are going to wonder, what about that gun? Well, the same thing if you see a baby carriage go through, something has to happen with the
Some
baby.
child in jeopardy, yeah.
But she says in this book on writing, the difference between writing nonfiction and fiction, which I really embrace. In nonfiction, you have to have all the facts. It's voluminous. You have to include every single fact. In fiction, you can winnow in more on the truth of what you want to say, separate from all the minutia of facts. So you really can hone in on a theme or a concept more succinctly.
I think what you're saying is key. I think also an author has a moment in the novel. It's usually in that moment of aha for the character, and you work towards that climactic moment when that character has to make almost a moral decision, and then comes the aha. Now I know what I really want. To my mind, that's the moment when you, the author, can really speak what your heart is to your audience, because the audience is ready for it. The character is realizing it, and you get to say it. It's just a great moment in writing. And I think every book should have it, but in a duology, I had to do it for this book. But the major moment is, I'm still working towards it in book 2.
I'm intrigued. So you do not shy away here from big issues. Race,
no, not at
class, gender. They're major themes of the book.
It's a complex story.
And they were certainly major themes in, I would venture, all human lives at that time,
Yes.
more than maybe people even consciously understood.
Yes.
But you go right at it. So talk about that process, how you decided to include what you included, and did you ever think of pulling back?
No, as a matter of fact, I was asked to pull back, and I said no. Because, these were, I waited too long, and this was a story, and Pat Conroy really wanted me to write this book, and I waited, and I moved publishers for this book. And it was in my mind for a long time, and in the story, there's Covey, her best friend, who's black. And when you're a child in South Carolina, in the rural especially, black and white children in history played together all the time. But when puberty came, the separation began. And I could not write this story accurately without being honest, because it was the Jim Crow era. So when I did the plot, I had to really think about how she has all these other relationships, her mother, tumultuous, her father, which switches. And I think that's another point. I try to be not nostalgic, and this is my first historical. You don't want to be nostalgic. Life was better and sweet. No, it was hard times. Joyful, but hard times. But I think the relationships with every person was as accurate and true as I could make them. But especially with Covey. And this young girl she was independent, fierce, didn't want to be a young lady, was good at riding horses, was good at mucking stalls, managing this plantation. But she was a girl when a girl had no voice. So of course I had to bring up, this is a feminist novel. I had to bring that up. And then the issues of primogeniture, which is a major issue. It's involved with territorialism, which is an animal thing, That's why you see a lot of birds in the beginning of each chapter. Of all species, birds are probably the most territorial. So all these issues come up in the novel, and you play against it in the relationships. And the most tumultuous was Covey, her best friend, the young black girl who was probably the love of her life, that and the horse. And she was colorblind. And dealing with racism, of all the issues I had to deal with, that was the most fearful for my publisher.
Right.
Because, you know, they're very sensitive about that. And don't call it a plantation. And I'm sorry, this is Charleston, and this is the very definition of a plantation. I'm not going to call it a farm, or this was what it was, built on the backs of the enslaved. But I'm not dealing with that. This is the setup. I'm talking about family and environment, but part of the human environment was Jim Crow.
Yes.
So I created this tumultuous relationship at the end when they go to Charleston, and the nature of their friendship must change because of Jim Crow in Charleston. And what I loved, and it really took a long time, Deborah, for me I called it the Battle of the Bells, you know, that battle between them was not about racism. It was about friendship. And that was really important to me. And so every time I dealt with primogeniture or territorialism or racism, was always in context of a relationship with a human being.
We'll take a short break and be back with the Ocean House Author Series here on WCRI.
Ocean House, located on the scenic Atlantic Ocean and historic Watch Hill, is one of only 14 triple five-star resorts in the world, with superb guest accommodations, a world-class spa, dining, and events. This year, Ocean House is once again hosting one of their most popular events, the Ocean House Author Series, with Deborah Goodrich Royce. Enjoy a discussion with beloved New York Times best-selling author Karen White on Wednesday, August 27th at 5 p.m. They will be discussing her latest captivating Southern drama, The Last Carolina Summer. Attendance includes a signed copy of the featured book, insightful conversations, as well as complimentary wine and delicious light bites. Held at the breathtaking Ocean House, this exciting event begins at 5 p.m. Wednesday, August 27th. For information and tickets, go to oceanhouseevents.com. That's oceanhouseevents.com.
And we're back with the Ocean House Author Series on WCRI.
Oddly, my next novel, which is a thriller, it comes out in February, it has a really strangely similar storyline. Very different story, different time period, not all the details, but there is a very strong female friendship between the protagonist and her best girlfriend who's black. And I thought about it in many of the same ways, and I don't lead with the fact that it's a white girl and a black girl who are best friends. And it was an interesting process having black readers read it, which you've done as well. One of the things, I guess, it was a parallel in how we wrote it. The black character understands racism much better than the white character.
That's it 100%.
Yeah.
She had a lot more to fear.
Yes. The stakes are higher.
The stakes are higher. And I thought that was, especially in Charleston, that on the plantation as kids, they played, there were a couple of issues, nothing important. But when they got to Charleston, lines were drawn. And Covey understood better. And the relationship, well, I don't want to say too much, but the other relationships involved, the blindness of Eliza about love stories. I'm being very deliberately coy here. That blindness was a kind of racism. It couldn't happen.
Right. No, it's a very complex topic. And I think with Eliza, and so she's the protagonist, she understands more viscerally and personally the gender issues she faces. Of her siblings, she has the greatest love for their land, but because of these, old rules and customs and habits.
She's a girl.
Yeah, she's a girl.
Isn't that a little bit of a universal, though? I thought about it, at least in my generation, even though primogeniture is outlawed, families still handed down land to the eldest son. But even today, they still do. Or I remember, I think I'm writing, even the girls, in my generation, it was the boys had to go to college or they had to prove themselves. And if the girl wanted to go to college, great, or not, but you're going to get married someday. And I was an academic, and it infuriated me. But I think one of the things that a novelist gets to do is to get her to even out the score in her stories.
Let's talk about academics. So you come to your novels with a strong academic point of view. I love how at the beginning of every chapter you describe a bird or an insect. You have some insects. It's just
a couple animals in there.
Yes. So
critters.
Is it flora and fauna? Or
yes.
Yes.
Flora and fauna.
Flora and fauna. So, and it's short. It's not enough to sort of take you out of the story.
Right.
But you're often setting up for what's coming, like the cicada, or there's a little lead-in. So how did you decide to do that?
I started with the beach house with that. And I believe that it's really important as a good writer to not dump information in your novel. Because I know when I get to the section, okay, here's the few pages where she's dumping her research. And you zip through because you're trying to get to the story. And I think it's really important to be so imbued in your place that it comes naturally. Of course, you're going to remark on the bird or when you're walking down the path, what leaves you might see or plants. But the epigram for turtles was I wanted people to learn about them without slowing down the novel. And every once in a while over the last 30 years, whenever I came across a novel that I thought it needed it, I would do it. And in this book, I wanted people to be in the Ace Basin. So every animal that I wrote an epigraph for is an animal that is in the Ace Basin. And a lot of birds, because, I love birds as that, but also because they're so territorial. And I thought that was good.
Yes, which is a great tie-in. So you have lived a chunk of your life in Japan. You've studied Japanese.
Hi, so desu.
Are you going to write about Japan or introduce Japan?
She went there. Oh, my Lord. Yes. Hontou desu ne, so suru tsumori. I love Japanese. I have my graduate and undergraduate degrees are in Asian history and Japanese. And I will be writing. So you have that to look forward to. I'm going to go a little rogue, but I look forward to it. It's a book that I've wanted to write for over 30 years. But I have, since The Beach House, Deborah, I have determined that every book would be a book that would hopefully bring awareness to the world about environmental issues. Every book was a love letter. And at 20 years, which is just recently, I tied it up with a bow and put it on a shelf saying, I did it, I finished. And I thank the readers because you volunteered, you donated, you voted, you care. I see people have moved to South Carolina to see their turtles, and do come. But now I realized look how hot it is. We are in a climate changing world. Look at Texas. My house in North Carolina last year was, that's Western North Carolina. You know what happened there. We're in it. So I really thought it's time to address a bigger issue now. How can I write about this preservation of species, our natural resources on a larger scale? And I zeroed in on the Ace Basin. And that's why I set the story there. And then when you do the research, I said, there's the colonial period, there's the rice plantations, and then they went bad. And then there's the whole thing coming in book 2, which I don't want to give too much information about, but it's all about the Northeasterners. who came.
You. So you gave the Gullah words, Kamya.
Oh, I love, thank you
what
for
are
saying
those
that.
words?
The Kamya and Benya.
Kamya and Benya.
The Kamyas are me.
You.
It's a Gullah word. Gullah is the indigenous people who live there, the African Americans who stayed in this coastal area. And in the language, Kamyas are people who come to stay. I've been there for 30 years, but I'll always be a Kamya. And in the late 1920s and early 30s, when the rice plantations had failed, and you're going to read about that, and all the land went fallow, in came the ducks to take over the old rice fields. Wonderful roosting spot for them, clouds of them. And following them were the Northeastern hunters, the great families from the Northeast, the Guggenheims, the Vanderbilts, the Delanceys, the Donnellys from Chicago, the Baruchs. And they bought up the plantations and hunted. And it was Downton Abbey.
Yeah.
They would come in for this, how could I not want to write about that?
Yeah.
So that's coming. And in that whole story, I wanted to show that these Northeasterners who came and bought thousands and thousands of acres, fell in love with the landscape and became good stewards to the land. And when the time came in 1980s and 1988, you're going to be in the room where it happened. I'll take you there. The families called each other on the phone. Charlie, we got a big problem here. There's a plantation coming and it's going to ruin our water, so let's get together and talk about it. So the landowners came and they decided to put the land in conservation. It was a new concept for them. But it's because of the Northeasterners that we have so much land in conservation in the South.
But isn't that the American story, really? I mean, my father's family, they were in North Carolina in the 1700s, and in 1806, they were not wealthy, so they didn't have a lot of land. There was a land opportunity in Tennessee, so they had to have been wild people. Can you imagine going?
Don't say too wild. My relatives went to Tennessee,
So
Chattanooga.
they went from this coastal area to the middle of Tennessee
Chattanooga.
in 1806. Well, they went to Dixon, which is near Nashville. But that's sort of the American migration. And then my father's line, then they followed the Hillbilly Highway eventually up to Kentucky and then Detroit. It really was. What was
Don't you love names like that?
The Great
You just-
Migration if you were black, and it was the Hillbilly
Yes.
Highway if you were white. But I think that's our way here until recently. So it's you really capture that. And I want to zero in on Eliza's father. He represents
Typical
someone
male.
who does not see the change coming. Going back to my sweater and the marsh tacky horses. This is a moment where automobiles are coming along. He kind of bets the farm, if you will, on this breed of horse, and everything is going to be this horse, and they're going to run the farm with this horse, and it might be a great horse and all, but the
bet on
day the
the
of the
wrong
horse
horse.
is, as his wife says. So,
Honey, you bet on the wrong
I think
horse.
through this character, you give us this historical truth that there are people who see the future coming and people who don't.
Yes.
But it's unavoidable.
And it was also part of his character. This is an old family, and he was devoted to keeping the land alive and believed in primogeniture. And I wanted for 20 years to write about the marsh tacky, so thank you for wearing that sweater
Yes.
today. The marsh tacky is an indigenous horse for South Carolina, and it almost went extinct. I think there's 340 alive today. And this was the chance for me to put him in. And it's because of the marsh tacky, Francis Marion, during the Revolutionary War, when he was in the marshes, we all know that, they were riding marsh tackies. They have very wide hooves. At any rate, I love when you can bring in the environment in a way that has meaning. So how do you talk about the marsh tackies? You have the father with a motivation for the marsh tackies. So they have a place in the novel. And the horse race for the girl. That's when people remember the horse, because they had an emotional bond with Capitano. So it's another example of how you look as an author and say, how can I tell this story so that you get the historical breadth? You understand this time in history as a woman, the challenges of a woman who had no voice, no vote, no value, truly, of power. There were always the exceptions.
Before we go to the audience, I want to talk about World War I and your incorporation
Don't
of
give
this.
any, no spoilers.
No, it's beautifully done.
Thank you.
It's an important period of time.
It's a hard part to write.
Obviously, it changed the world, the whole world. And I think you've told it in a different way. And it's hard to tell an old story in a new way. We all know what that war was. We know about trench warfare. We know a lot about it. I really liked, I mean, it's always Eliza's point of view. You see other people's points of view. Was it difficult for you to figure out how you wanted to move through that period of time?
And to keep it fresh and to keep the pace of a novel. So the letters. And I actually was in Normandy and saw the letters from the soldiers. They have a whole, like a museum, and you can sit and listen to the letters. And this was World War II. But it was so powerful, and that was the inspiration for the letters. And what they felt and what they were, the letters are so personal to their loved ones. And what he wrote to each, what, for example, Hugh wrote versus Haywood, and how Haywood would write to his mother and his sister and his loved one would be different. And it was just, I cried with each letter that I wrote.
And I got to thinking about letters and how few we send and how few we receive, and how it's going to be different 100 years from now, looking back at what we leave.
You know, that is one of the major reasons, two reasons and takeaways I want to offer you in this whole book series, the two of them. We don't tell stories. We don't sit at the table. I remember my relatives coming to visit, sitting around the table with a drink and a cigarette.
Oh yeah.
And they talk about who came on Ellis Island, and the crazy Aunt Susie, and all these stories that you hear about that are real stories. And interestingly, when my husband passed away, and when he was sick, I got letters, and my mother-in-law passed away, all during COVID. I got her letters that I had written to her. Yeah. And I was shocked, because I don't remember. I was always a letter writer. It was like reading a diary of my life at that time. And I realized I don't do that anymore. Emails.
And did you also remark on your own penmanship and how it's changed? Because my mother recently died, and my penmanship was very different when I was doing my junior year in Paris.
It is
I had this completely different penmanship than what later evolved, and it's kind of fascinating to think about what is revealed in that. Is this the hand of a young person or a more mature person? And we will not have that window.
No, but I encourage everyone to have the conversations at your holiday tables. Tell when you die, your stories die with you.
Yeah.
Write them down. And the second takeaway, if you don't mind me jumping in and saying, is legacy. That's a major theme of the book. It's Eliza at the beginning says, I must save Mayfield. That's the older woman. And for her, it's a place, it's more monetary, it's photographable. But as she starts telling the whole book, she's telling stories of her family. And the girls are listening and she's softening, but her understanding as she changes in both books is, what am I really leaving behind? What is my legacy? And that's the challenge I leave to all my readers. What are you leaving behind? And she thinks it's a thing, it's a place. But when she sees her granddaughter and her grandniece, it might be who, not what, I'm leaving behind. So it's a challenge. And when my husband passed away, Marcus, who you met, he was a very accomplished man and wrote hundreds of papers. Brilliant. But no one talked about that when he died. To a person, and this was fairly recently, everyone said he was kind. He was kind, and they had a story to tell. And I thought to myself, that is the legacy, isn't it? He was kind.
You just said something very important. With my mother dying recently, and people reach out either in person or they write to you and they tell a story and experience. I think it's one of the most wonderful things you can do for a grieving person. If you knew the person they're grieving, the one who died, if you tell, you can give a window on that person that they might not have.
Yes.
And it's so
story.
Precious. It's really a wonderful thing. Not to get maudlin, but the grieving process is very powerful, and it's not all negative. It really isn't.
It isn't. I think the grieving process in the book too, the mother, I mean, I don't want to give away too much, but it was destructive. And it didn't have to be, and I think Eliza didn't want it to be destructive, so she made the choice she did, to your point, and it got her in trouble.
Right.
But
yeah, she was trying to
soothe. Sometimes judgment. I just love stories when they touch you, because you can understand why something bad happened. And it's not always happy, but it's true. And I think we learn from true stories. Don't you?
I do too.
We'll take a short break and be back with the Ocean House Author Series here on WCRI.
Ocean House, located on the scenic Atlantic Ocean and historic Watch Hill, is one of only 14 triple five-star resorts in the world, with superb guest accommodations, a world-class spa, dining, and events. This year, Ocean House is once again hosting one of their most popular events, the Ocean House Author Series, with Deborah Goodrich Royce. Enjoy a discussion with beloved New York Times best-selling author Karen White on Wednesday, August 27th at 5 p.m. They will be discussing her latest captivating Southern drama, The Last Carolina Summer. Attendance includes a signed copy of the featured book, insightful conversations, as well as complimentary wine and delicious light bites. Held at the breathtaking Ocean House, this exciting event begins at 5 p.m. Wednesday, August 27th. For information and tickets, go to oceanhouseevents.com. That's oceanhouseevents.com.
And we're back with the Ocean House Author Series on WCRI.
I think it's time to go to your questions. I'm sure you have them. How many of you have read the book already? Oh,
All right.
Great.
So
No spoilers, but ask away without spoiling. Question?
I know what your question is. You can say it.
So the question is, for listening audience, when is part 2 coming out?
I am writing. I am working hard. Kathy's on my case over there. But I will be done soon. And it's not up to me. But we have heard you. The publishers heard you. And we're hurrying the process along. So I'm hoping sometime next year. Please have me back so we can talk about it.
I'm having you back. No, so we get attached to these kind of family sagas. I did 7 years, my dear friend Susan Sterling is here, 7 years of Downton Abbey dinner parties every Sunday night.
Lovely.
How were there 9 or 10? Every year for 7 years, we would do these dinner parties. They were so much fun. And you grieve when a story like that ends. You want those people. They're part of your life. So, next.
Any
Here's
other
one.
questions?
What is the most challenging aspect of writing this book?
The size of it. The story was so big. And I had to really think about what had to be included. And I had a lot of false starts. You know, originally I was writing about conservation. That was the heart of it. And it was so boring. You know, so that's why I decided, it took a lot of false starts, and I realized once I linked into Eliza as my storyteller, I knew what I had to do. And because it was always about why she put the land in conservation, and I'll put you in the room where it happens, but it'll be part of a bigger story. So how to tell the story, and also how to remain true and accurate in light of all the challenges of racism and territorialism and primogeniture and women's rights and all that. But I couldn't think about anything but how my characters would behave in a true fashion. And when you're writing a novel, we look for universals, and in novel writing, that is something that, regardless of whether it's a contemporary, historical, mystery, whatever, it's something that's true, that everyone understands. A mother's love for her child, a friend, the grieving of a loss of a best friend. Those are universals that if you can add those to the story, you don't need to explain it. You know it already. So that's what we tap into.
What I really love about your writing is that my mom loves it a lot.
Thank you.
And so I just was wondering, you said one of the main themes was legacy. So the legacy of like authors and passing down stories and novels, like who are like some of your favorite authors that you would like to pass down to like the newer generations?
Oh, what a great question. Okay, I can answer this because there was one review that made me cry. It was really great. It was Kirkus, was that right, Kathy? And they actually said the book was a classic, and they compared it to some of my favorite novels. So they compared it to Thornbirds, which was great. Now, young people probably never read it, see? And Barbara Taylor Bradford's Woman of Substance. And then one book, my all-time favorite novel, The Shell Seekers by Rosamund Pilcher. And I'm crying, and I said this to my daughter. Oh my God, they compared it to Rosamund Pilcher. Who's that?
Yeah.
The truth is, as far as legacy of a writer, I don't know whether in 20 years you'll be saying, I met Mary Alice Monroe, and your child will say, well, who's that? And that's okay. Because what I want to do, and I really meant to do, is to make a difference, especially regarding the environment, in my time. Because if I can help change, or sway people to care about the environment today when things are at the precipice, then I've done my job.
But I do want to say something about that. I think about childhood and just wandering around the bookshelves and picking up a book that you don't know anything about and you don't necessarily intend to read, or being a guest in a house with a pile of books in the bedroom and you pick one up. I think books really do go on forever, and so that's what we should all do. We should sort of curate our collections for our guests so that they discover things that, we want to share and pass on.
Word of mouth, it's kind of word of mouth, which is the best. Oh, Kathy.
Take the mic, Kathy, we want to hear you.
I'm reminding you to invite everyone to the Wild Dunes series.
Oh, yes.
So I think it's around January 16th. And then reminding everyone that Deborah will be coming to Charleston to the Wild Dunes series at some point in 2026 to celebrate The Best Boy.
Yes, read The Best Boy. We love that. You're invited every year for 20 years now. I've had an event at Wild Dunes, which is on Isle of Palms, just outside Charleston. And it started with 35, and over the 20 years grew up to 500 plus, and it's a weekend. So y'all are welcome. I always have great authors. I have had Deborah. You spoke with David Baldacci.
And Kathy Rice.
And Kathy Rice, that's right. And you brought them here, didn't you?
I was kind of the rookie in the crowd, let me tell you.
You held your own. They loved her.
They were very nice.
You had your own luncheon and you did very well.
Very nice.
So you're all invited. I wish I could tell you who's coming this year, but we'll know soon, I hope.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this special broadcast of the Ocean House Authors Series with Deborah Goodrich Royce. Please tune in each month as we'll bring you a new Ocean House Authors Series highlighting nationally best-selling and award-winning authors in a salon-style conversation. Hosted by Ocean House owner, actress, and best-selling author Deborah Goodrich Royce. The WCRI is pleased to be partnering with the Ocean House to bring you this ongoing series highlighting the best and the brightest of the literary world. Thank you once again for joining us. And in the words of Margaret Atwood, in the end, we all become stories.